Morning Line taking your phone calls, and we'll see how many we can get for Fletcher Long before the end of the hour. As I said, trying to keep this going, and ask your question quickly. We'll get to as many of you as possible, and I'm going to shut up. Let's go to Wanda. Hi, Wanda.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Wanda.
I was wondering, how did the girl stay in pain for 4 days before she went to the hospital? And number two is, why did they try all the boys at one time instead of trying them at two at a time?
Well, the answer to the second question is they're never going to try the second two. And any suggestion they are is ridiculous. They're not. Yeah. So there we go.
Okay. And
let's just dispel with that right now. Right. They're not trying the other two.
It's not going to happen.
That is not
And that's
happening.
why you say this is a
not
case.
happening. They're not trying the other two.
No equal justice.
No.
All right. Let's go next to Brian. Hi, Brian.
Why do the attorneys have to get permission from the judge to present evidence or ask questions as long as they give the other side that information?
All right, legal lesson.
That's a good question. We have rules in Tennessee of evidence, and a party is permitted to object and say that question isn't relevant, or it's meant to curry prejudice with there's no probative value or any of the other. It's a hearsay, or it's and they have a right to lodge the objection, and it's the judge's job to determine whether or not he's going to, because not just everything comes into a trial. Not everything comes into a trial. What you're seeing is kind of a whittled down version of the facts. Now, maybe the jury should see all of it. I don't know. Maybe that, but people that are smarter than I have passed rules regarding how trials should be conducted, and trials are not evidentiary free-for-alls. You know, it's not, you don't just get to throw everything up there. You've got a victims' rights amendment where you're not allowed to question the victim about promiscuity or any number of things that you think may have lent itself to the event. You are fettered in what you can present, and maybe that's why you have professional trial lawyers that are supposed to know this.
Gotcha. Let's go to Angela. Hi, Angela.
Okay, my question is, for one, why come Vanderburg didn't get charged with he led her over there, so that was premeditated? And then second of all, my thing is, was they not prepared that they was going to go to jail? Because Vanderburg was really just shot. Were the parents and Vanderburg not prepared that they was going to go to jail?
I see what she's saying on that second point. Watching in the courtroom, obviously you're going to be stunned when a verdict comes down. How prepared do you imagine Brandon was? Did he understand clearly that, at that moment, if a guilty verdict comes back for the serious charges, he's taken into custody immediately? Do you think? How much were you guys able to prep him?
He had been told that, but I don't think that Brandon ever contemplated that he would be convicted of the serious charges. I think Brandon believed the fact that he had not himself engaged in any of that conduct would be sufficient to gain acquittal in those counts. And I can't be critical of that thought. I mean, you obviously never tell a defendant that they're going to win a case, but I believed in him, and I believed in our defense, and I believed that it would be successful, and I was wrong. So, I mean, I wasn't offered anything. There was never a decision. There was never a point where we had to decide whether we wanted to risk a trial, because we were never offered anything but a trial.
That was our only
so
option.
If the offer is a trial, you go to trial. I mean, and the other one is there isn't a premeditation element to as a material element to any of the charged offenses. She's thinking of murder cases, and there wasn't a murder here.
A little different. Yeah. Gotcha. Let's go to Albert. Hi, Albert. Are you there, Albert?
Yes. How you doing, Nick?
Sure. Go ahead, sir.
I just have two opinions.
Well, really want a question, but real fast. Go ahead.
All right. My opinion is I agree with Mr. Long that them two defendants that was not charged with the crime, they shouldn't even needed them to do to go through the court proceedings.
Okay. Okay. And do you have a quick question, maybe?
No.
Okay, well, you said as much. In your mind, it wasn't equal justice, and that you think they're going to get more of a slap on the wrist. I don't know what they'll get compared to what your client got.
Well, I don't know if they're going to get a slap. I don't know what they're going to get, but they're not going to trial.
Okay.
I mean, there would have been no reason to not try the four together if the other two were ever going to be tried. I mean, it's the same case against these two that it would be against the other two.
Gotcha. Who should we take next? Do we want to squeeze in another couple? Hey, Judy. Go ahead, Judy.
Yes, I want to know who you reported this incident in the very beginning, I never did hear. If it wasn't the victim, how did this come out?
Can you clarify for this? And I don't want to go over everything, but it was found on surveillance video. They said that they were looking, how did you understand this, for someone involved in an act of vandalism unrelated to this, and they were going back through, just scanning through the surveillance video looking for a vandal. Is that how you understood it?
That's the way I understood it.
Did they ever catch the vandal?
I don't know. It may have been the guy that stole the golf cart.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm wondering.
So the great golf cart caper. You know, they got more capers at Vanderbilt than the great golf cart caper. They need a trained member of the bar to be the head of their crime suppression unit, Vanderbilt Police Department, because apparently there's a ton of crime. But from my viewing of the video, I believe that the first person that started taking inappropriate pictures was actually Brandon Banks. But it came into the trial. I guess you can watch it for yourself. But that's my recollection.
But that's the cell phone video of it. And then she was talking also the surveillance video. Look, as we wrap things up for you at this point, again, I just wanted to go back. As you think back, and I know it's just been less than 24 hours since the verdict, anything different you would do different if they were going to turn back the clock, and any other strategy now with what you know now? I know hindsight's 20/20.
Well, I lost, so if I were going to try this case again, if I was going to try this case again, I might seat a different panel. I mean, what I'd be a fool to do the same thing again.
Sure,
so I'd have to come up with a new theory. But I'm very confident of the fact that I worked very hard for my client's interest. I tried the best case that I knew how, and I tried to present it in a way in which the jury would find reasonable and credible. And they did take 3 hours to render a verdict. So they didn't just run back there and say, all right, he did it, let's go home. Yeah. And they took 3 hours at a time when they were worn out and sick of being there.
Gotcha. The issue here going back, and you and I have been doing stories dating back to the Arthur March, Perry March cases. Of course, you were involved in this. You've been involved in many other cases, and you have a private practice that's thriving. A lot of cases no one ever hears about. But
I do pretty well in the cases that y'all don't cover.
Well, I know,
but of course, anybody can say that.
I want to say this because I get calls. People know I know you, and they say, "Well, does Fletcher ever win any cases?" Because some of these high-profile cases, you think about another one, the wooded rapist. The wooded rapist.
I won one of those.
Okay, you did, but on top of that, though, I mean, people point to this, and I always try to make the argument, you take on some very high-profile, difficult cases maybe that others won't take, or simply because you believe that everyone deserves a defense, and you take on cases where you know there is a lot of heavy evidence.
I will just say that many of the performances I've rendered on behalf of defendants has been covered from gavel to gavel on television. Roll the tape, you watch it. If you can watch my performance in a courtroom and say I never win, then God bless you.
Well, certainly many of these high-profile, clients keep coming back to you, and we should say that you go from this to arguably the even larger criminal case in the state, if there's possible one, and you're right in the middle of the Holly Bobo case. Can you give us any insight real quick as we end here? I mean, where does that stand? You represent Jason Autry, one of the suspects, 2 murder suspects in that very high-profile case. No trial date set. Do you have all the discovery yet? Any issues there with who the heck is the prosecutor?
I may have more discovery than I realize because I've been kind of tied up in this trial, but I'm going to say that as long as there's not a tape of the event occurring, I feel like that we can mount a very sufficient defense here. But these high-profile cases, these governments spend a lot of resources in prosecuting these cases. They assign them to the best prosecutors they have. There's a lot of pressure on the court to not release it on any type of a technicality. And so these high-profile, the Metro government didn't spend the resources it did and assign the prosecutors it did to this case for me or Warwick Robinson or Albert Perez to come on television before the entire nation and make them look foolish. Right. So, I mean, they thought they had a great case where they'd have been making offers, and there you go.
And that kind of, what you're up against, plus the media spotlight, ever intimidating?
Well, it is. You get sick of it. Because frankly, it encompasses into your private life, and it makes you a public figure, and it makes you coverable no matter what happens. You get a speeding ticket, it's all over the news, and that's kind of ridiculous. And that's not something for which my children necessarily ask, but they have to live with.
Do you think the camera in the courtroom in any of these cases most recently had any effect on the performance in the trial courtroom?
It doesn't affect my performance. Okay. I'm going to try the same case, but I think it does. I think it impacts juries.
The jury's aware of it.
I think the juries watch the coverage, even though that they're instructed not to, and so every time they turn on the news, and I'm not trying to be critical of you guys, but y'all, you know, strong day for the victim, you know, this victim, poor victim, you know, this victim ought to get justice and stuff. That's got to impact them. I mean, it's almost like they're inundated in a world that's calling for some. I know they're not supposed to, but it's like they're in a world that's calling for these defendants' heads, and they're supposed to be rendering an impartial, fair judgment on whether they should get this head.
Do you think they should have been sequestered?
Absolutely, and we asked the court to sequester them. They should have been sequestered. Absolutely.
So your fear is that maybe, and you don't know this for certain, they were aware of what was going on outside the courtroom with the coverage.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, I think it's a little bit unrealistic to expect lay people on a jury for 2.5 weeks to not watch the news, because it was everywhere.
Well, I'll say this. Yeah, to me, I don't think anything intimidates you, Fletcher Long, and you're no shrinking violet anyway, but certainly you go from this back to your private practice. Well, this was private, but cases that aren't quite as public. But the Bobo case rests in the future. Do you anticipate a trial sometime in the next year?
Well, I don't know. I haven't really seen enough of the evidence to determine whether they have any case against Jason or not. And if they don't have a good case against Jason, they're not going to go to trial with me on a questionable case.
Yeah.
Because it's hard enough to beat me when you got it all.
Well, we'll be following that one closely. And listen, Fletcher, thank you very much for coming on such short notice after that very long trial. And thank you. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We'll see you again soon. Take a break. Be back with a programming note about tomorrow right after this.